Right, welcome back. We had a volatile week in the stock market this week, filled with the Fed, earnings, and a lot of market volatility. So we'll start off here with the heat map. Some of the big winners this week was Apple and Meta. They had some good earnings numbers this week. And then you have some of the big losers was tech services. So you can see a lot of the software names, Microsoft, Palantir, Oracle, taking a beating this week. Tesla also had earnings. They were down 4% on the week. I had a Tesla earnings video, so if you want to dive deep onto those, check out that video. But the belle of the ball this week was going to be commodities, interest rates, and the dollar. So the dollar this week started off with a very steep drop, and on Friday we had a nice move back up. But you can see here, we kind of broke down below this $100 level. And we'll see where we go from here, but dollar looked very weak to start off the year so far. And on Friday we did have the new Fed chair be announced, and on Wednesday we had the Fed rate cut decision, which they decided to hold rates steady. So potentially some strength coming back to the dollar, but we'll have to wait and see here. And this caused a lot of volatility in the metals. So on Friday we had one of the largest drops in gold and silver. So gold was down, shows here 9%, but the futures were down even more. But just a huge red candle on Friday. We're looking at the weekly chart. If we zoom in, you can see here a drop from almost 5,600 all the way down under 5,000. And then silver had a 30% drop on Friday, wiping out a few weeks of gains here. So a lot of volatility here. This is trillions of dollars that was taken out of the market, the metal market, and all commodities here kind of took a hit. Platinum, copper also dropping. So looking to see what happens next week in the metals market. You had oil have a nice week this week, and we are over 65 a barrel. So not the best sign for things here, but we'll have to see if this is just a retracement in our downtrend here. Again, we zoom out, we have just been bobbing up and down, but slowly making our way down into the low 50s. So hopefully we can get a pullback on oil, but a lot of volume coming in here and a lot of green candles for crude oil. Natural gas up again this week. So it is up probably 80% now. Yep, 80% in the last couple of weeks. Not the best sign here as well, but could be some seasonality here as we get the cold weather creeping in. So as far as some of the earnings names, let's start off here with Microsoft. Microsoft, they beat on their earnings, but the stock tanked. I would say a lot of this has to do with the OpenAI concerns. A lot of their revenue is coming from OpenAI. Or at least some of their earnings. Obviously, Microsoft makes a lot of money on their software. And as we saw in the heat map, the software services in general are taking a hit. I think there's a little bit of disappointment on how slow they're able to adopt and utilize AI with some of these other models that are popping up, like Claude. They're just doing a much better job for B2B, business to business products, and Microsoft is kind of dropping the ball here. They don't really have anything that's too exciting compared to some of these smaller startup companies like Anthropic, and that is where you're seeing, Microsoft is spending $100+ billion a year on AI spend, and they don't have any intriguing products compared to some of these other AI companies out there. So the market kind of taking Microsoft out behind the woodshed here. It did drop 14% after earnings. So we'll see if there's some follow through there on Microsoft. But again, they did report $81 billion in revenue for the quarter. So can't really argue against that. That's a pretty good number. The other big name here was Meta and Apple. So Meta, they did a great job on their advertising business, and they had a beat on earnings, 59, almost 60 billion in revenue for the quarter. And that is a lot of cash flow. So they are very profitable business. But they did increase their capital expenditure guide for the year. I believe they were originally guiding around 105 billion for this year, and they bumped that up to 115 or 130 billion for the year. So these companies are still spending a lot of money on their AI build. And that is likely why you saw a company like Nvidia have a decent week this week, is because all those companies' capital expenditures are going to a company like Nvidia. And they'll report earnings not until the end of February, so we'll have a few weeks until they come out. Apple had a great quarter this quarter. iPhones sales look good. Services look good. This is just a cash cow. Let's see, $144 billion in the quarter. So phenomenal quarter for them. I think their computers were down slightly, but I think some of that will change here in the near future. I know that they are sold out of a lot of their computers due to the memory shortage that we have, the RAM shortage. So we'll see how their next quarter for computing goes, but everyone's going to keep buying iPhones. That is just a cash cow machine. All right, so interest rates, let's take a quick look because they did hold rates steady. So not a big change here, but we are starting to move in the wrong direction. If we look at the trend, we are starting to curl back to the upside here on interest rates, and we would like this to come down. So the new Fed chair that was announced, I don't know a lot about him, but it will be interesting to see when he gets in what his rate policy will be. But not a whole lot to talk about here other than we are moving in the wrong direction, at least in the short term. So we'll see where we go from there, and along with the dollar. Now, last but not least, let's take a look at crypto because it is getting destroyed over the weekend. And we are down under 80,000 for Bitcoin, 76,000 here. And pick a coin, any coin, it's getting crushed. But we'll just talk about Bitcoin today. But it is down quite a bit just in the last couple of days. You could feel the volatility percolate on Friday, and it seems like we may be in for a nice little series of VIX spikes and big market moves. VIX is currently at 17.5, and we do have some big name earnings next week. So I don't expect this to collapse back down under 15 unless we get some really good news from a company like Amazon and Google. I think Google's next week as well. So I will keep you guys posted on those names, but a pretty interesting week this week in the markets, and I'm excited to see how the futures open in a few hours here this Sunday. So have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Peace out.